The STEM Learning Ecosystems Community of Practice and the Lemelson Foundation have partnered to bring you this series of critical conversations on the importance of invention education. My name is Jeremy Shore, and throughout this series, we'll be joined by families, students, and experts in the field who will share their own experiences and lessons learned. You can find me on Twitter at Jeremy Shore, and today I'm excited to learn more about the ways that invention education can prepare young people for the global challenges of today and tomorrow, and I hope you are too. Today, I'm joined by Katrina Hull, a career and technical education teacher from McKay High School in Salem, Oregon. You can find her on Twitter at Mrs. Hull_math. Katrina's primary focus is giving students a solid foundation while in high school that they can use as a springboard to jump into what's next. She has a deep passion for seeing all students succeed and giving students opportunities to connect to role models that look and sound like them. This work is like Katrina to heading up the CTE engineering pathway at McKay. So Katrina, like my wife, you have a math education degree. I don't really understand. How did you find yourself as not only a CTE teacher, but kind of leading up this pathway when your background is more traditional math education?
Jeremy, I think that's a hysterical question because sometimes I look back and I'm like, I don't know how I ended up here. And I think I just kept saying yes over and over. There was a lady from our district office who said, hey, there's this after school engineering program. It would be a great opportunity for our students. You teach at a Title I high school. Let's get some more funding into the classroom. Let's give them some opportunities to invent and be creative. And I was like, well, if somebody from district office is telling me I should do this thing, sure, sign me up. So we started this after school engineering club. Students got hooked into this idea of like creating and solving problems for things within their community. I had a group of students who went up to Portland State University and did some presenting at the big demo day, which is an event that this after school engineering club did. And at that event, there was an individual that connected us to the next thing. And he said, hey, Katrina, your students, they're pretty awesome. And I was like, yeah, they're the best. And so he invited them to participate in Portland State University's Clean Tech Challenge, which is a invention, it's an invention competition, really, because there's funding associated with it. You come in, you do some prep work, you pitch your idea, and then there are prizes at the end. So my high school students went to this college competition, and Jeremy, they swept the college competition. They walked out of there with about $20,000 in prizes, like the big, massive check.
Oh yeah, I've always wanted to get one of those.
It was the coolest thing ever.
For sure.
And for students who have never had a significant amount of money in one place, like, this is a big deal. They had invented the process and they had invented some machinery to go through and turn lunchroom plastic into 3D filament. And this was all because we couldn't afford a 3D printer in our classroom, like the 200 bucks for a 3D printer. So that was kind of like where it started. And then during that year, as this team was going through that invention cycle and they kept winning all of these things, I was still in the math classroom. I was teaching honors geometry at the time. And I had a group of students that said, okay, so Mrs. Hull, you've been away at some of these competitions. You haven't been here in the classroom every day. Why are you doing this? And I said, sometimes we do things and we say yes because we don't know what it will lead to in the next door, through the next door. What's it going to lead to? So we got done with that competition. The high school students ended up representing Portland State University at the statewide invention competition called Inventor for the state of Oregon. They got second place.
That's amazing.
Super cool stuff. And then I took a group of those honors geometry students on a field trip because teacher currency, that's all that you have.
Right, yeah.
I could take you on a field trip.
Right.
They said yes. And it was on that field trip that there was a student that turned to me and said, okay, Mrs. Hull, you said that this opportunity would lead to something for us. So what opportunity do you have for me? And I was like, what? you're not wrong. Like, I need to find an opportunity for you. So that was when we started down the path of the Lemelson MIT program.
Mm.
And we went through the process of applying for one of their grants. I received the Excite Award. I went to Cambridge to MIT, and I got to experience what that was like. And then I came back and I had a group of students that walked through that invention process. We received the $10,000 grant from the Lemelson MIT program. They invented throughout the entire 2018-2019 school year, and we took all 11 students to Boston and had such a blast. So that's like stuff that's been happening after school.
Right.
In school, it's like not all students have access to after
Sure.
school opportunities. So for us at McKay High School, we said, what can we do to bring Invention Ed into the classroom? We had engineering classes that were kind of on their way out, and thought it would be a really great opportunity to pull in some of this Invention Ed experience into the classroom. And that's kind of how I came into CTE. So it was all of these
Yeah.
multi-level things happening at once. And here we are teaching CTE classes, running some after-school programs, and students are empowered to just solve problems in their community.
And, Katrina, you and I were talking before we started recording about how teachers in general sometimes need to say no more because everyone's overworked and burned out and all those things. But that's the counter argument, right? Right? Is when you say yes, sometimes this really, really cool stuff happens. I'm curious. So you ended up needing to really, take this engineering club that I think semi-existed, but kind of make it a real thing, and then also to develop this in-school course. I'm sure there were some stumbling blocks along the way. I'm wondering what you wish you had known in the beginning, that if people are listening and they're planning to build either an after-school program or a course, what is it that is going to help them get that moving better and faster?
I think you have to be comfortable with not knowing,
Mm,
which is so uncomfortable,
yeah.
especially as a math teacher. There's always an answer. There's a way you can check that answer. If that process doesn't work, go about it a different, like it didn't, that was something that was like really hard for me to grasp. But really within Invention Ed, the magic is that journey.
Mm-hmm.
It's failing along the way. And when we fail, who do we bring to the table to help us overcome that obstacle? So I would say for anyone that's starting Invention Ed, starting that journey, just know you will fail. And I say fail because it's going to feel icky.
Mm-hmm.
And then find the people in your community that can help supplement that can help you learn. You're going to learn alongside your students, and that's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, it's a thing that I talk about in my work a lot, and it sounds like you do too. We talk all the time, right, about that we need our kids to learn how to fail the right way, to fail, to learn, to not give up, grit, to, all the buzzwords of 2014 that are still somewhat around. But then what we do is we tell them that, but then in K-12 schools and probably higher education, we hone lesson plans so that they are perfect. We practice, we find all the bugs at home and separately so that we never fail in front of them. So we tell them they need to fail and do it the right way, but we never show it. So I think that's such a huge lesson and a hard one, because it's not what colleges teach you to do, to fail in front of your kids, because you're not only taking a little bit of the burden off yourself by not being perfect, but you're actually teaching your kids, arguably one of the most important lessons that we can teach them.
Right. And we in education expect our teachers to be these content level experts that stand on these pillars that can do all these incredible things. But really, the world is changing. And I don't need my students to understand content at a deep level. I need them to understand how to problem solve at a deep level. So if I can get them to that spot, I think that really has shifted my thinking in my invention classes that we call them engineering at the high school. One of the bits that we do oftentimes in class, we call it our favorite failures. And we will take actual works of students myself or things that other students have created within the classroom, and we hold them up and we make fun of it for a
Mm-hmm.
little bit. Like, this sucks. This is not good. Here are the things. What could be improved on it? Because really, that's what invention is. Are we really inventing new things along the ways, or are we just iterating upon things that we've learned to problem solve? So I think there's a lot to be said. And I look back at my math experience in the classroom, and I wish I would have taken more opportunities to celebrate that learning process along the way.
I love it. I love it. So, Katrina, one of the things in your bio that I thought was interesting is, there's been, fortunately and finally, a whole lot of talk about equity and disequity. These last several months, it's a conversation that we've, needed for a very long time.
Mhm.
And a lot of people have been talking about making sure that we have students be exposed to people, to professionals in different careers that look like them. I don't think I've ever had somebody say and sound like them. I'm curious where that came from, what that means to you.
I think of one of my students that taught me that when we went and presented in front of the Lemelson Foundation. I had a student that after the experience, she said, Mrs. Hull, I'm so glad that Juan Barraza, who is the PSBA accelerator, he's the program manager for that.
Hmm.
Um, he said, I can't believe, well, Jimena said, I can't believe that Juan was so comfortable and confident with his accent. My accent, I always feel like I need to learn to speak more clearly so people can understand me. And he was so comfortable and confident. And it just made me know that I can be comfortable and confident the way that I sound. And Jeremy, I had
Yeah,
not thought of that before. And she was 100% right.
absolutely.
And it brought a new perspective for me that it's so much more than just a surface level.
Mm,
It's diversity of backgrounds and experiences. It might be skin color, it might be the sound in their voice,
mm,
it might be the shoes that they're wearing, it might be the food that they're eating. Like the diversity of those experiences, I need to be looking for opportunities to make connections and ask my students. So now that is something that that student can say, hey, Mrs. Hull, I really liked hearing from Juan. Do you have anyone else who is working in this field? And I know, okay, I can find somebody for that student that's working in that specific field
yeah,
that sounds like that student
I,
to
I I
help
love that
overcome
so
that
much.
barrier.
Katrina, I love it so much. I like a little goosebumpy, to be perfectly honest,
Yeah.
because that's now added into what I'm going to talk to people about, and it's just not something I really thought about before. And it's not even just accents, from different countries, or hearing impairments, and just all sorts of things that might make some students feel uncomfortable or incapable, and just that power of showing that you can do this.
Mhm.
Might not be what you want to do, but if it is what you want to do, that those things aren't what's going to be what holds you back. And I love it so much. How do you find those people? You said, if I know that if I have a student who is concerned about X, and interested in career Y, that I can find somebody. What kind of resources do you tap into to fill those gaps, to find those people?
I'm a talker.
You don't
So
say. I am too.
I that is something that if there's someone that I'm looking for and
Yeah.
connecting with, anyone I am coming in contact with, my building principal, other
Hmm.
teachers, I'm thinking of like, who are the people that I normally see? I will say something to my husband, and then he will go and talk to his coworkers.
Mm.
Sometimes I put out an ask on Facebook because we live in such a digital virtual world now
Hmm.
that okay, maybe I can get something in person, but maybe I can set up a Zoom call. And that could also fill the need. So really it's like if there is something that I know that I need, I'm going to just start asking and keep asking.
Hmm.
And it always works out. I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah, no,
know.
I
It's
love it.
like
I
the
love it.
magic of networking, which
Right,
I don't think teachers, there wasn't like a networking class. I think of
right.
like business majors, that's always like you're going to go to these events, you're going to socialize, this is going to be the time that you can network. But as teachers, like we're in the building so much,
Right.
I think we forget that we actually know how to network really well because we do it with students.
Hmm.
And it's not much different doing it with adults.
It's amazing how often too you'll find that there are all sorts of people out there. I mean, I bet hundreds of thousands of people out there that have interesting experiences, jobs, careers, all those things that are willing to participate. They just don't know how. Nobody asks them, so they don't. It's amazing how often teachers will say, I really wish I could find somebody from Facebook, and in a day they find somebody from Facebook because they want to do it. We just sometimes are afraid to ask. I love that too. I do want to ask you, and we talked about this a little bit before we started recording too, but you're lucky to be not only teaching this course, but to have a whole pathway in your school district. But we know, unfortunately, sometimes things change and funding changes and all of that stuff, and not every district might be that lucky. So I'm wondering, now that you've had these experiences in invention education, in engineering, if things changed for whatever reason and you were back in a math classroom,
Mhm.
say, algebra 1 or whatever, whatever the class is, you'd have standards to teach, you'd have all those things you had to get through. um, what would or could you bring in from invention education into those kind of core classroom concepts?
So I think before I answer that question, I want to go back and say that the engineering pathway
Mm,
at McKay High School, the year prior to me starting to walk into that,
mm-hmm,
there were about 40, 50 students that were requesting that course
mm-hmm.
and that pathway. This is a school of about 2,500.
Okay.
So numbers, that doesn't really,
Right.
uh, it sounds like it's a program that's on the decline.
Right.
And yeah, and when we started working and saying like, hey, we're bringing in this invention ed into the classroom, the year that I started with that, we had about 500 students that requested that course. So it's like the on ramp was massive. But when I think about like, why did that happen? I think it happened because we were celebrating the learning.
Mm,
So what I would take back to the classroom really is that celebration of the learning. And I think that within the engineering class, I've now been able to say to students, okay, let's this time make your assessment be, instead of it being content focused, let's have your assessment be on the reflection. Like, can you tell me where you were, where you got stuck, how you learned along the way?
mm-hmm,
And if you can explain that trajectory, that will show me progress towards your standard, and that will be your grade for your assessment.
mm,
And I think in the math classroom, a similar thing could be done of can you explain where you are on this continuum of learning? Where did you get stuck? How did you overcome that? And what are we doing moving forward? I think it would also be advantageous to my students if I did a lot more in the exploring phase
mm-hmm.
at the front end of the lesson and letting them try things and fail, or letting them try things and get to an answer that is correct
Mm-hmm.
but a different path than I was taking them down, and just helping them understand that math, which is for a lot just really a different language,
Mm-hmm.
like you really do have the skill set, you do have the knowledge to walk down that path. So those are some things that
Yeah.
I've been thinking about, especially with potential job cuts, with the
Sure.
tax base on decline, right? So like
Yeah.
all of the funding things, like we are getting into a space where education is going to be like, it's going to be sticky for a
Yeah.
couple of years here, right? And I know that I might go back into a math classroom and I'm ready for it.
Yeah. I love all those things, and I also kind of love this idea that even in a district that has these resources, that there's a home for invention education in those
Mhm.
core content classrooms regardless of what the other resources are, whether it's supporting the learning of the specific invention education components, or it's the only way students are exposed. There's a lot of power there to use inquiry and kind of deep dives and problem solving to think through our traditional content. Katrina, I wanted to close with a question that we've been asking everybody, and I'm curious what your take is. To you, what's the power of invention education?
The power of invention education is moving students from the place that they feel stuck in to a place of power and empowerment. I think invention education has the power to be a generational change. So the impacts that students that are in my classroom right now are experiencing with invention ed and understanding that they can solve problems in their community. They can go to college, they can go to trade school, they can start a job. Like whatever it is for them will then impact generations to come. It's not impacting that individual student as a silo. Like it really is a generational impact. And we are helping our students learn to think, and we're helping them to problem solve. And we really are preparing them for something that we've never experienced in the world before. And they're going to be great. And they're going to lead us into whatever is next.
Katrina, I love that. What a gift we can give our kids if we can have them leave our schools with the toolkit to solve problems in their own homes, their communities, or their careers. I really appreciate that answer. This has been a conversation about invention education brought to you by the STEM Learning Ecosystems Community of Practice and the Lemelson Foundation. Thank you, Katrina, for joining me today. Throughout this series, we will continue to be joined by families, students, and experts in the field who will share their own experiences and lessons learned about the global challenges of today and tomorrow. My name is Jeremy Shore, and thank you for joining us today.